Hello, everyone. This is Janet Coppin with the Socialite Production, where we are connecting the world through faith, culture, and entertainment. I am a connector. I am an influential. I am a world changer. I am a storyteller. And today I'm going to do some storytelling to connect you to resources. Primarily, we're here to just talk about immigration. There's been a lot of changes. And, as it relates to me, I'm a first generation Liberian-American. So I know firsthand the story of immigrants. Ursula?
Thank you so much, Jeanette.
You're welcome.
I'm Ursula Brumskine Bonar. Welcome to my home. This is my home office.
Yes.
I am an advocate. I've always been an advocate. I'm a housewife. I'm also a mother. And I'm privileged to say that now I'm an empty nester because both of my kids are grown and they're gone. They check in regularly, but thank goodness I'm an empty nester, so I can devote more of my time to advocacy.
And professionally, you own your own law firm. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I'm the proprietor and managing partner of Immigration Law Offices of Ursula B. Bonar. In my practice, I do 100% immigration. Mm-hmm. I defend individuals seeking to change their immigration status here in the United States. I also provide resources for people wanting to bring family members to the United States, or for people wanting to change their status in the United States, whether they're students or they have TPS or asylum, or if they want to change their status from one immigration status to another, that's what I do.
Nice. And how long have you been doing that?
Oh my goodness, I'm going to date myself. Thank you, Jeanette, for aging me. But I've been practicing immigration law for over 28 years. Yes.
No, it does not look like it. Are you sure?
28 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely go into that as it relates just to the storytelling of what led you to 28 years, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about where you're from, the story of just your upbringing that led you up to here?
I am a Liberian. I'm an American now, but I was born a Liberian and I'm still a Liberian. My family had to flee Liberia in the 60s to move to England for political reasons, and we were allowed back into Liberia in the 70s. So I did my elementary, high school in Liberia, came to the States and did college. And because I'm a Liberian at heart, I went back to Liberia and I did law school there. Mm-hmm. Came back and I got my master's in the States because I wanted to work and give back to my own people in Liberia. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we had a coup. Yeah. I'm not a soldier. I'm an advocate, not a soldier.
Yeah.
So I was one of those who didn't stick around to see what would transpire. I came here and I started advocating for other immigrants like myself, because I found myself in the United States, like so many people do, as an immigrant, not by choice, but by circumstances. Mm-hmm. And my own pathway to citizenship in the United States made me understand that people need a voice. Mm-hmm. People need safety and freedom. And so I devoted my career to representing immigrants. Prior to me becoming an immigrant myself, I worked as an advocate for corporations in commercial transactions. When I first came to the States, I continued commercial transactions, but because of my own immigrant journey, my heart was pulled towards immigration law. And therefore I opened my practice, and here we are today.
So from an education standpoint, you guys can't see all the degrees and pictures, but I see 2 different graduation classes there. I see 3 degrees here. You want to talk a little bit about the depth of your background?
Well, okay, so as I mentioned in the prior section that I was in Liberia. I was practicing representing commercial corporations in the government. So my background to do that, I had gotten a master's in international commercial transactions out of Harvard, the law school there. But when we found ourselves caught up in the Liberian Civil War, there was no practice going on. And so I made my way back here, and I went back to school to GW, George Washington in DC, and I got my law degree in immigration law, which would facilitate my practice.
Okay. And then from there, did you go back to Liberia to practice, or you just stayed in America? That's when you stayed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I was practicing in Liberia first.
Mm-hmm.
Graduated from Louis Arthur Grimes.
Right.
And I started practicing in Liberia, and because of my clients,
right,
I decided to get a master's in law to better advocate for them.
Right.
Because we were doing international transactions. Harvard Law School was noted for churning out international lawyers. So I made my way to Harvard, got my master's in international commercial transactions, went home, and unfortunately,
right,
the Civil War. So I made my way back here, and going through my own immigrant journey, I went back to law school.
Got you.
Got my degree in immigration law, and started practicing, advocating for other immigrants who were like myself.
When you did that, you were in the D.C. area, the DMV area.
Yes, I was in D.C., and so I was practicing in D.C., Virginia, and Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my clientele in that area were Salvadorians. I had a few Africans, but most of my clients were from Latin America.
Okay. And then from there, you migrated, you and your husband, to...
We moved to North Carolina, and my clientele changed tremendously. My clients, right now in my practice, the bulk of my clients are either Ukrainian, Russian, from Burma, or I have some Latin American clients and some African clients, but the bulk of my clients are from Eastern Europe.
And that's one of the reasons that...
I'm sorry, Afghanistan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had a huge influx of Afghan people after the war there. So I have a lot of Afghan clients
as well. Okay. As a first-generation Liberian-American, I want our Liberian community to know that we have resources that look like us, right? And so for those who may not know you, or who knows you and don't know the depth of what you do, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to present you today. In addition to, there's a lot going on in this political climate, and a big part of that is immigration. There's a lot of people who are scared, who are confused, who need resources. Talk a little bit about not just you choosing to serve the immigrant community, but why law?
I can't even remember when the choice was made for law.
Okay.
It's just so ingrained in me.
Okay.
My dad's a surgeon, and so the expectation would be for me to go into medicine.
Right.
But I'm so thankful my older sister covered that area for me.
Yeah, okay.
So I could politely back out of it.
Right.
And say, no, I want to be a lawyer. And I can remember playing with my dolls as a 10-year-old, advocating for the dolls.
Yeah.
Punishing them, putting them in jail, having my little court cases. I've always wanted to be a lawyer. I cannot imagine myself, it's like breathing. I cannot imagine myself without law. So it was not about law. It was about what area of the law would I go into.
Right.
So by process of elimination, I eliminated different areas of the law. They didn't sit right with me. And when I finally landed on immigration, I felt like I was home. Because I love people. I love people. I love stories. I love travel.
Right.
I love culture.
Right.
And with immigration law, you get all of that.
Right.
Because with each client, you are transported to another part of the world.
Right. Especially with different nationalities.
Yes.
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
And so you learn about their culture, their religion, their food, and it feeds my soul.
You can tell, like, we had a long conversation prior to this interview, right? But it's just the joy and enthusiasm you get just from talking about it.
It feeds my soul.
Yeah. And those are the type of people you want representing you, not those that's just looking at you as a number in a paycheck. So
this is why I work for myself. This is why I opened my own practice, because I wanted the freedom to accept the hard cases. I wanted the freedom to accept the cases that people might not want to take.
Right.
And I wanted the freedom to say no to some cases. I need to know that I'm doing a good service. I'm doing good work. So
let's start by talking about the state of immigration prior to this administration and where we are now.
I know there's a lot of fear in the country and outside of the country as it relates to immigration. And there's reason to be fearful, but there's no reason not to hope. Because we've never been where we are right now.
Right.
But we've seen iterations of it. And all through America's history, it's been cyclical. There have been waves of migration, and then there's been backlash to the wave of migration. We are a country of migrants. We are a country of immigrants. So it's ridiculous to say that we don't need immigrants, or we don't like immigrants. We wouldn't exist but for immigrants. Only the Native Americans are from here. Everyone else is from somewhere else. It just matters the date of your arrival and how you arrived. Some came on vessels, seeking new lands, seeking freedom. Some were brought here in chains on vessels, in bondage. And you had people coming, running away from wars. People have always come to the United States seeking freedom and possibilities and potentials. And as I said, when you have a large influx of new arrivals, then the people who are here lash back. They did that to the Chinese Americans. And then you had the immigration laws limiting the number of Chinese Americans and trying to take away their citizenship. They rounded them up in camps. They took away their stores. And we've never truly recovered from that. You had the Irish Americans when they had the potato famine in Ireland, and they came seeking food. They were, they just wanted to live. They were poor, and there was no future because their land was not giving them what they needed. After generations of farming, their farms didn't produce, and so they came here seeking better farmland. And the people who were here before rejected them, and there were new laws trying to limit them. Fast forward to where we find ourselves today. We have the wars in the Middle East. You have all of the incursions in Latin America, where you have commandos and you have organized crime gangs, just making it impossible for people to make a living. And like generations before them, they look to the north, they look to the west, and they come to the United States, the land of immigrants, seeking just a better future for themselves. You have the wars and you have the famines in Africa. And people come to the United States seeking what immigrants have always sought in the United States. In the Middle East, you have the situation there. You have Ukraine and Afghanistan, and now Gaza and Israel. And so you have people coming to the United States just seeking freedom. And like before, you have the backlash. You have all of these laws, or now we don't even have laws. We have these executive orders saying you can't come, or only these people can come, but these other people can't come. And the people who are already here, you have executive orders saying the people who are here have to leave. And the people who were born here, you have an executive order which is not constitutional saying people who were born here are no longer U.S. citizens. We've gotten the third federal judge coming out against that executive order, ruling it unconstitutional, because birthright citizenship has been birthright citizenship since the 1800s, and it's not going to change because of an executive order. It's going to take a constitutional amendment because it's ingrained in the Constitution, the 14th Amendment. If you're born here, you're a U.S. citizen.
Right.
So more of the executive orders, getting rid of TPS for Venezuelans.
Yeah, real quick to break that down, because some individuals watching this don't know like what TPS, DD, all of those different statuses.
Oh yeah.
But kind of break that down and then tell the story.
Temporary protective status, otherwise known as TPS, is given to a country, to nationals from a specific country because of a natural disaster or a war or something that makes it impossible for the citizens of that country to remain there. And so Haiti has TPS, Venezuela has TPS. There are two other countries that were given TPS that by executive order, the current president has said that these countries will no longer have TPS. We're holding our breath. Liberia has not been named as one of the countries whose DED is deferred enforced departure or deportation. We haven't heard anything about that ending, but if you look at the trend, there's not a lot of promise or a lot of hope for people who are under temporary protected status to hope that that temporary protected status will be extended. In fact, under Project 2025, one of the tenets in Project 2025 is to eliminate humanitarian parole, which a lot of people who are fleeing their country because of violence have entered the United States, and at the border they are automatically given humanitarian parole to enter the United States because they don't have a real safe country to live in. So we give them humanitarian parole while their country is going through an influx, with the hope that their country will settle down and they will return home. A lot of the Ukrainians are in the United States under humanitarian parole. This is not a permanent status. This is just like TPS, a humanitarian period where they could seek a more permanent status in the United States.
Bridging their like green card, work visa.
See,
you don't have to go through all of it, but just to categorize it.
What I talked about before are temporary status that is given to nationals of other countries who cannot live in their own country because of maybe natural disasters like earthquakes, hurricanes,
right,
floods that destroy the infrastructure of their country, and so they make it here for safety, for refuge.
Right.
And so the United States government issues a blanket permission for them to live and work here while their country is trying to get back on their feet.
Right.
And during that time, it might be a year or 18 months or 2 years. Within that period, it is expected that either the people who are given that temporary status will find a pathway to a green card or citizenship.
Okay, got you.
And if they don't, if their country or when their country is able to reabsorb them into the economy, then the State Department will make the determination that this country no longer needs protection. Green cards are lawful permanent residency. And by the term permanent residency means that you have decided for one reason or another to make America your home, to permanently live here. And so applications are filed and you become a permanent resident. This takes a year, a couple of years, depending on what your status is before applying for a permanent resident status. Now you can apply for, not everybody can apply for permanent status. The gateway to a green card is usually either through a family member who will file for you and sponsor your immigrant visa, or through an employer who will file for you and sponsor your visa, your immigrant visa. If you come from a war-torn country and you come as a refugee, which is a United Nations term, the United Nations will declare you a refugee. You've left your country and you've gone to a third country, usually it's a neighboring country, to seek refuge.
Right.
The United Nations will house you and feed you, and they will classify you as a refugee. And they will find safe haven for you in one of the UN countries.
Gotcha.
And that's how some people come to the United States as refugees. Some people go to Germany, England, but the United Nations will designate which country you will go to. And so if you come to the United States as a refugee, you are given the ability to file for a green card to become a permanent resident 365 days after entering the United States as a refugee. So you don't need a sponsor because the United Nations has sponsored you to come to the United States. So you don't need a different sponsor. So after a year of being a UN refugee in the United States, you can apply to become a green card holder, a lawful permanent resident. The other way you can become a lawful permanent resident, if you don't have a family member or you don't have an employer or you're not a refugee, is if within the first 365 days of arriving to the United States, you file an asylum claim. And an asylum claim, you can file a claim if there's a danger of you going back to your home country. If there's no safe place in your home country for you to live, then you can apply to become an asylee.
Okay.
And if your asylum petition is granted, 365 days after that has been granted, you too can file to get a green card. Now, citizenship, after you get your green card, if you get your green card because you were an asylee, if you get a green card because you were a refugee, if you get a green card because your employer sponsored you, or if you get a green card because a family member sponsored you, you have to wait for 5 years
Mm-hmm.
before you can apply to become a United States citizen. The only exception to that is if the family member who sponsored you for your immigrant visa is your spouse, and if that spouse is a U.S. citizen when they sponsored you. Then instead of waiting 5 years, you only have to wait 3 years. In a nutshell, that's how you get a green card. There are a few other boutique ways of getting a green card, but those are the general ways that people get green cards, people get citizenships, and how people live in the United States.
But it's a progression. You can't just skip. You have to go through this before the temporary status before you go there. Okay.
You have to have a green card before you become a citizen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And to get a green card, you either go through your employer, through asylum, refugee, or a family relative.
Let's talk about what's lawful and what's not as it relates to, if somebody does not have the proper status or they do and they get stopped by the police.
Okay, so let's start with the police.
Okay.
Because that's the most common law enforcement agent that people are likely to see, that everybody's likely to see.
Okay.
You have the police out there, and they are, for the most part, in uniform. If they're not in uniform, they have to identify themselves as police. If you are stopped by a police, you have the right to remain silent. The police do not have the authority. They don't have the right to ask what your immigration status is. And as I said before, you have the right to remain silent. So even if the police asks for your immigration status, you have the right to say to the police, I do not want to speak to you. I would like to call my lawyer. And that is everybody's constitutional right, the right to remain silent. The right not to incriminate yourself. You're not doing anything illegal. You are just exercising your right. So if the police stops you, if you're walking on the street, you have the right to remain silent. The police cannot search you without reasonable cause. If you are walking down the street and you have a bulge in your pocket and you smell like pot and it's illegal to smoke pot in your district, he has reasonable cause to believe that you're carrying pot on you because you smell like it. But there has to be reasonable cause. And regardless, you have to articulate, I do not want to talk to you. I do not give you my consent to search me. Mm-hmm. And you have the right to record that interaction with the police. If you're in the car, if you're a passenger in the car, you have the right not to be searched. If you're the driver, the police can ask you for your license and your registration, and you have to give the police those documents. Outside of that, you don't have to give the police your immigration status. The police cannot search your vehicle without probable cause. So you have to figure out, do you have an open container visible in your car? Do you have a weapon visible in your car? If there's no probable cause, you have to say, I do not give you consent to search my vehicle, because that is a private space and you have an expectation of privacy. That's one of your constitutional rights, the right to privacy. If you are in your home and the police come to your house and they knock on the door, you have the right not to open the door. You have the right to ask the police for identification. Mm-hmm. If the police tells you that they want to enter, you can refuse entry. The police have to have a warrant signed by a judge. They can't have a warrant signed by somebody in the police station. It has to be signed by a judge. So you can talk through the window. You can ask them to push the warrant under the door, and you can read the warrant. if it has your name, your address, if it's signed by a judge, then you have to open the door, but you don't have to talk to them. The only thing that you have to say to the police is, I do not want to talk to you, I want to call my lawyer. And he has to let you call the lawyer, and you can record the whole interaction. So that's as far as the police. Now, if ICE, ICE, comes to your house, that's the Immigration Customs Enforcement, which is the enforcement arm of immigration. If they come to your house, they too have to have a warrant signed by a judge. Without a warrant signed by a judge, they have no authority to enter your house. You can refuse entry. You don't have to speak to them, and do not sign any documents, whether it's by a police or whether it's ICE giving you a document. Do not sign the document. You can take the document and tell the police or the ICE officer, I want my attorney to read this over. If you sign the document, you could be signing away your rights. You could be signing away your right to go in front of a judge. You could be signing away whatever. So you could be signing away your green card. So do not sign any documents handed to you by ICE, and do not believe what any ICE officer or police officer tells you. You talk to a lawyer. Homeland Security, HSI, they usually conduct raids in businesses, a place of business, and like anyone else, you have the right to remain silent. You do not need to speak to any of these people. You can record any interaction, and you have to ask to speak to your lawyer.
That's very good information, and I don't even think it's limited to immigrants, right? It's just in general, your
yes.
rights. But we also understand not all cops, not all law enforcement, but there's a lot of intimidation, there's a lot of aggression, right? What would you recommend if there is force and, you know, they don't have time to say, I'll speak to my lawyer, you know, like those are scary situations.
So, and this is where being a part of the African-American community, we have an advantage because from an early age, people are taught how to face police encounters.
Right.
You know, we have been taught, keep your hands where they can see you. Don't make any sudden movements that might be misinterpreted by the police. Because you can always appeal an unjust arrest, but there's no appeal for death. You know, you don't want to end up on the wrong end of a gun or, you know, a barrel. So if the police stops you, stop. Don't run. You know, I don't care what you have on your person. There's always an argument. There's always a case that can be made. You need to stop and listen to what the officer says. Don't fight back. Don't resist. Articulate your rights. This is a good time to pause and, you know, look up a lawyer's phone number
and just call
and just make sure that it's one of your emergency contacts.
Yeah. And you know, you saying that, you're bridging into the next piece because you knowing your rights as it relates to law enforcement stopping you. Now, what is the plan? What is a good recommended plan that you will give not only to, you know, an undocumented immigrant that's here, but even those who are here legally? Because as I was told, some of the raids were taking people who were legal, documented citizens, right? Who happen to be immigrant, but you know what I mean? What is the plan that you would recommend?
I would recommend and it's sad, but it's real, okay? I would recommend for anyone who looks or sounds ethnic. You can be a U.S. citizen, but if you look and sound ethnic, my recommendation is that you take a picture of your immigration documents. If you have a U.S. passport, take a picture of your U.S. passport. I don't know anyone who doesn't travel with their cell phone. Okay? So if you have your cell phone, you will have a copy of that photo of your US passport in there. So if you are stopped, you can ask the officer, always ask, because you don't want them to confuse your cell phone with a gun. Mm-hmm. You can ask the officer, can I show you my US passport? And you pull up the photo. If you don't have a US passport, if you have a green card, you by law are required to travel with your green card. Okay. So that's not even about taking a picture of your green card. You are required to have it on your person. So again, you tell the officer, it would not be a police, because the police cannot ask you about your immigration status. It would be an immigration officer, mm-hmm. either ICE or Homeland Security investigator. You tell them, officer, can I please show you my green card? I have a right to be here. I have a right to work. And you pull up the picture of your green card. If you have been granted asylum or if you have refugee status, make sure you have pictures of that. If you have a case pending, take a picture of your receipt that you're already in the system. You have an alien registration number and your case is still pending. And you show the officer that will differentiate you from someone who's not documented. Right. Same if you have parole status, if you have DED, whatever your immigration status is, make sure you take a picture and you have it in your phone. Now, for your actual documents, you need to go and look for these documents today, and you put it in a safe place in your home, and you tell a responsible adult where these documents are, because you might find yourself incarcerated, having to make that phone call. Could you please go and get my documents and bring it down to whatever facility? Mm-hmm. And once they bring the actual documents, it should just be a matter of process to get you released. Hopefully you won't have to go through this, but it always is good to have a plan. Now that's a plan for you. The plan for your immediate relatives who are in your care, because some people have children, some mm-hmm. people have aging parents who are in their care. You have to have guardianship papers if you're undocumented. If you are documented, you're coming out, so you don't need that. Mm-hmm. But if you are undocumented and there is a real probability that you will end up deported mm-hmm. or held somewhere for any length of time, you would want to contact a lawyer to draw up guardianship papers for your children to allow whomever you choose to be able to get these kids from school, to be able to take these kids to their doctor visits, to be able to take your parent to their doctor's visit, to be able to speak on their behalf if they're in the hospital. For your property, you would need powers of attorney. If you own a business, if you own a house, you need to get an attorney to draw up powers of attorney with a trusted individual as that person that you're going to give that power to in case you end up in that situation where you are deported. So your house won't just go into foreclosure. Right. That person who has power of attorney will be able to sell your house, get the money, and send it to you wherever you are. Or they might be able to continue the business in your name and, send you the profits from your business. But these are things to think about now and plan for.
Let's talk about resources. So the information that you shared, even about knowing your rights and just the different breakdowns of the various components. Is there a website or some type of resource?
There are lots of organizations
Okay.
that specifically cater to immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
And I would urge your viewers
Mm-hmm.
just to do a general Google search
Okay.
in your area, because
Yeah.
in every community they have immigrant groups
Right.
and organizations that provide services, legal services to immigrants. And it might be a little challenging now with the federal government cutting off federal assistance to these organizations, but there's still some out there. And barring that, private lawyers.
That's what we're getting to, right? So talk a little bit about what you do, what you offer, and if you want to share your information of how you can be reached.
Well, as I said, I'm an immigration attorney. I've been practicing immigration law for the last 28 years. My practice is located here in Charlotte, North Carolina. So if you're in the Charlotte region and you find yourself in need of an immigration lawyer, you can look me up. I think Jeanette will post my contact information
Absolutely.
somewhere in the podcast.
Yes.
And we will do a consultation. If we can help you, we'll tell you what our opinion is of your situation, and we'll make recommendations. And if you want to proceed with my law firm, we'd be happy to represent you.
What would you personally recommend those who are immigrants, those who may be nervous, scared, or even have relatives, how to just relax during this climate?
And I know a lot of eyes will roll, but I will just tell you my truth. It might not be for you, but for me, throughout my life, I've gone through different upheavals. As I mentioned briefly, I came to the United States almost like a refugee when we had our Civil War, and it was not my plan. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself in a situation that I had not chosen. I had dreams, desires, wishes, goals for myself, and I had to set those aside because there was a new reality. 2025 is a new reality for half of the United States. And you look at it as a period in time. This is not the end of the world. The Bible says, and this too shall pass. There are situations that are out of your control, and so you just understand that this situation is not within my control. And if you have a higher power, that's the time to look to that higher power and give it up to the higher power. Worrying has never solved any problems. You have to be focused, make your plan, and once you stick to the plan, you just give the rest up to your higher power, because there's nothing that you can do. Staying up at night, locking yourself in your house is not going to change your situation. You have to understand that everything will work together for your eventual best. It might not be what you have planned for yourself or what you would have chosen for yourself, but know that there's life after every situation. Maybe you don't want to live in Kentucky, maybe you don't want to live in DC, or maybe you don't want to live in Guatemala or Liberia at this point in time, but maybe that's where you are being called. Maybe there is a mission for you. Find out what that mission is. Find out what that purpose is. We started about looking for purpose. Find out what that purpose is. And once you find that purpose, your anxiety will peel off. I don't want to be Pollyannish. This is a difficult time. There's a lot of anxiety. But when you understand your rights, you exercise those rights, and then you just give it up to the higher power, things will work out for you. You know, you'll either get a green card or you won't. And if you don't get a green card, that means that there's something better out there waiting for you. Just remember, your circumstance and situation is not who you are. Mm-hmm. If we all find what our purpose is, who we innately are born to be, it doesn't matter where you find yourself. You will still be that person, and you will still be able to practice that purpose wherever you find yourself. That's all I have to offer.
That's good. That's good. And like I said, immigration, that's for all immigrants, right? All nationalities. But speaking specifically to our Liberian community, as I said, I'm a first generation, Liberian-American. Of course, you were born in Liberia. You experienced the soil of Liberia firsthand. Do you have a message for your Liberian community, your Liberian family?
Yes. To my people. Mm-hmm. We've been given a lot of opportunities to adjust our status in the United States. If you want to live in the United States, this is not the time to hide in the shadows. Mm. This is the time to seek counsel, because I promise you, no matter what you think your situation is, if you reach out to a reputable immigration attorney, they will be able to walk you through what your real options are. And if you're not satisfied with one immigration attorney, seek counsel from another. Mm-hmm. But this is not the time to be afraid. This is not the time to hide. Whatever attorney you go to, all lawyers are covered by an ethical code. Mm-hmm. Whether you come to me as a Liberian or you go to another lawyer, we all are covered by an ethical code of silence. Nobody's going to listen to your case and talk about it at the water cooler tomorrow. Nobody's going to identify you. Reach out for a consultation. Let's talk. Let's get you legal. Let's get you on the path to an actual green card, to actual citizenship, so you can go on that next trip to the Bahamas when people are going on their family reunion.
Right. That's a factor. Yeah. Part of who I am, I'm a connector. I'm a connector with faith. I'm a connector with resources. I'm a connector with my culture. And so I represent the Black American culture, but I also represent my Liberian, my African culture, because that's who raised me. That's who groomed me. That's who trained me. And I still live as a Liberian today, right? I'm not connected. Some people, they don't deal with their culture.
So you know how to eat rice.
I know how to eat rice, foo-foo, kasali, all that good stuff. All that good stuff. But I say that to say, even as we're sitting here talking, mm-hmm. I can't help but to see Mr. Burroughs behind me in his books. Because he is the ultimate connector, and he's actually connected to your family. Speak about immigration. What you said, some of Liberians living in this country like it's theirs without getting legal status, they feel like it's their country. So there's a connection. But let's talk about that a little bit for those who aren't aware of the connection between Liberia and America. And even your amazing brother-in-law.
Shout out to Dr. Patrick Burroughs, super educator, consummate historian. I did my elementary school and high school in Liberia. I studied world history in the United States. I did not know my history until Patrick opened my eyes to the deep, deep history. And talk about personal history. I can call him Patrick because he's my brother.
Yeah. Y'all call
Dr. Barnes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, not Mr. Doctor. My bad. I'm sorry.
Dr. Barnes. But he showed me a piece of research that he was doing that he stumbled across, where he had traced my maternal line, my grandmother's ancestors, to a slave plantation here in the United States.
Wow.
And like when I met Jeanette before, I was telling her I have a picture of my grandmother, and she was like, "Who's this lady?" And I was like, "She was a feminist before the term feminist was a thing." And I just thought she was a feminist. But to learn of my ancestor, who, a single woman in her early 20s with twins and a toddler, twin babies and a toddler, setting off on a ship back to Africa because it was an option. Her master had left in his will that if these certain slaves agreed to make the transatlantic trip back to Africa, they could be freed. But if they did not, they were to remain in slavery. So my ancestor, she decided, I don't know where I'm going, but I know where I am now.
Right.
I'm not going to accept slavery for myself and my little kids.
Right.
So she worked and made money to pay for her passage on that ship back to Africa. And that's where my grandmother came from.
Wow.
Her great grandfather was one of those twin infants on the ship.
Do you know what part they settled when they...
In Clay Ashland.
Okay.
In Clay Ashland.
Okay.
And they were given land when they landed to settle there. And I'm like, wow, we had strong Black women back then
yes.
who said, I'm going to find a future for myself, which is so funny because she went to find freedom in the 1800s to Liberia, only for, hundreds of years for there to be a war and for me to pack up and come back.
Be here.
But that's like one of the connections between the United States and Liberia. We have so many people, and in fact, another way to get citizenship is to trace your ancestry to an American. And unfortunately, the slaves were not considered citizens.
Right.
So you have to trace your ancestry to the slave master.
Wow.
Yes. But 23andMe, DNA, there are ways, if you can trace your ancestry, that's another path to citizenship.
It's interesting. I never knew that was a factor. So I didn't, so that's interesting. But let me go back real quick to your grandmother or great grandmother, who you said was a feminist, and she, fought, strong woman, right?
Oh yeah.
But that's your legacy, and that's what you're living out. It's just different, and it's here, and you're helping people find freedom by way of
immigration.
Yeah.
Come out of the shadows, people.
Right. No, right. But what you said too is real, and people need to hear, because a lot of people do not trust anybody.
Yeah.
So I get why they're, some of the immigrants are hiding, but we have to stress there is help out here for you. And especially from a fellow Liberian, don't think, the narrative of talking up. No, it's confidential information.
It is.
It's confidential, but you would
trust me. I'm not going to risk my license, to talk about somebody. No.
Right.
I work too hard.
Before we close, I'm a person that's always talking about vision and purpose, right? Even if you know your why now extends years from now. It evolves. So as it relates to, I guess you'll say immigration, or even your why, the U.S., whatever connecting point you want to talk about, what do you foresee for the future as it relates to Miss Ursula?
I just hope to continue being blessed to be a part of other people's stories.
That's good.
You know, to make a difference, you know, to help somebody, to make a difference. Because I found out that immigration is so important, so integral to how you walk through life in the United States.
That's true.
If I can be a part of making somebody else's journey easier, lighter, I'll be a happy person.
Yeah. Yeah, you have so much within. We haven't even scratched the surface.
Well, thank you, Janet.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure sitting down with you.
Yes, indeed. Any last words?
That's it.
All right. Well, this is a Socialite production, connecting the world through faith, culture, and entertainment. I hope you found this session informative. I hope you see Ursula as a resource. Definitely connect with her. And stay tuned. More storytelling to come. Thank you.
Thank you.